Greg has actually talked about it quite a bit on stream here, and that is synthetic fuel and sort of like the future of internal combustion. Not necessarily the future of cars, but the future of internal combustion. And with the news that Ford is now coming back to Formula One, and Formula One's direction to go towards more carbon neutral, which will include synthetic fuels, Ford is actively looking to save some of the things we love about Ford cars, which there's only one Ford car, it's the Mustang, and can cars like the Mustang and enthusiast cars like that have the engine is almost as big a part of the vehicle as the total package itself. We've always waxed on about how the death of internal combustion or the V8 and everything like that would be a sad day. Well, it might not actually be coming as soon as we think or at all. Ford is actually looking into synthetic fuel. Porsche has done it. Porsche is going to be running the Cup series, their Porsche GT3 Cup class on synthetic fuel. A few other people are going to be doing synthetic fuels in motorsport. Where this becomes really, really interesting is that Ford is actually buying into it. And it might mean that the Mustang and the rest of my lifetime might continue to have a V8 with it, which is awesome because the best part about my Mustang, without question or shadow of a doubt, is the engine and the noise and the way it revs and all this other stuff. And electric vehicles just lose that. They're stupid fast. The tech that's coming for electric cars, whether it be solid state batteries, whether it be sodium ion batteries, whether it be all this other sort of stuff, electrification is very interesting from a technical standpoint, but when you drive it, the thrill is the thrust. And not accompanying with sound, that's something we're all going to have to adjust to at some point. Or we have synthetic fuels. Porsche has been saying that synthetic fuel right now costs about $45 per gallon, which is a lot. It's not really feasible for the public at that price tag. Maybe as a race fuel, but not like that. They're bullish on the fact that they can get it down to about $8 a gallon by 2026, which in reality isn't that far away. It's not like gasoline's just going to disappear and we're going to have this 3-year gap of nothing. So $8 becomes a little bit more palatable. Yes, that's roughly about a little less than double the price of premium now. It's within the realm of possibility. It's not eye-wateringly expensive like, I don't know, $45 per gallon. So the Mark Rushbrook from Ford told Fox News Digital, we are committed to fully electric vehicles. It's an important part of our future, but we also know we're going to have combustion engine vehicles in different parts of the world for a long time. And we want to do that in the most responsible way we can. And that's basically synthetic fuels. Greg, let me ask you this question. How do they make synthetic fuel?
That I don't know, actually, because I haven't looked into the real hard science behind it. I just know that it's derived from the same molecular structure. Other than that, I don't know anything past it. They can essentially just synthesize the same molecular structure, which then in turn makes it's very similar to pharma in that respect. Like you basically break it down by the molecule and then you know what it does, and then you can then recreate that molecule on a much larger scale and then create the fuel based on a molecular production. Over and over and over and over. So that's the basic science behind it. I have not dove into that rabbit hole. I want to, because that's the stuff that I really geek out on. Hopefully either next stream or stream after, I'll be able to give a really high science approach to what synthetic fuel production kind of looks like.
Hunter can actually fill in the gaps for you. He says they make it synthetically through synthesis to synthesize the fuel, which is ultimately synthesized into explosions and vroom vroom noises.
That's the best. I don't even need to go into the science of it. That's the best description I think anyone could have ever made. That's great.
Exactly.
In fact, that should be on the Wikipedia page for synthetic fuels.
The thing for me always with synthetic fuels is nobody's really I know Porsche was diving into it, but nobody else was really out loud working with it, right? I'm assuming everyone who's involved in Formula One is working with it. Mercedes, Honda, Ferrari, some French company that I don't want to name.
Renault.
Yeah, exactly why. The thing of it is it's nice to see someone like a Ford. And Ford is one of those manufacturers that sort of moves the needle. it's one thing for Porsche to be doing it as a subsidiary of Volkswagen. It's another when
Yeah.
the parent company starts dealing with it. Yeah.
That's the point I was going to make too. Like Porsche is great, huge sports car company, large enough to be on the main stage of like everyone knows who Porsche is.
Right.
It would be along the same lines as Volvo as far as volume of sales is concerned, right? So a couple 100,000. You're not talking like millions and millions of. But you're right. When someone like Ford now enters the conversation, that's like Toyota entering the conversation. That's like Volkswagen entering the conversation. Volkswagen not so popular in the US. There's a reason why Volkswagen is one of the top three, because globally they are. But it's someone like that entering the conversation. When Ford enters the conversation, everyone's ears sort of perk up and go, oh, okay, this might be a very interesting and viable option. To your point earlier on $8 a gallon, that actually is quite palatable, because in my use case, an electric car as a daily and a V8 sports car utilizing synthetic fuel as a fun, vroomy, boom, boom explosion car, as Hunter so eloquently put it, sounds like a very good two-car garage solution, or two-car
A lot of
solution
synchronized
for garage. You get a
synergy
daily
there
that can run on electrons, and then something that can, I can use two to 4 days a week for videos and just having fun with. That sounds like a great freaking time and extends the ICE well beyond what it should be, according to current stuff. So I'm very much into that conversation and very much for Ford entering the fray there, because now it sort of gives not that Porsche isn't a major player, but a major volume player.
Well, Ford
in that game.
I look at it from this standpoint. If you're going to buy a Porsche new, you're fairly affluent, right? So it's not an everyman sort of a thing. Ford,
right,
often associated with being blue collar. Think of it, I look at it from this perspective. Ford does it, puts it in, say, the Mustang and a couple pickup trucks. Chevy, General Motors, and Ram aren't going to want to be left behind, because I guarantee you the pickup truck segment is going to cling till the death of it to internal combustion in the pickup truck. So if Ford does it, the other two aren't going to be left behind. So guess what happens?
Right.
More people start buying into it. Now all of a sudden, Ford, Chevy, their sports cars have this. Well, okay, if the Corvette can do it, now you have other people entering the fray. You have Toyota thinking about it. Like now all of a sudden, all of the major players start to play in the synthetic fuel sandbox. And now all of a sudden, that starts the conversation beyond the automotive industry, right? That starts the conversation with like, hey, maybe 2035 isn't the best time to switch to all electric. Maybe we don't have the infrastructure for it, and a lot of Europe doesn't have the infrastructure for it, let alone some of these other countries and stuff like that. Maybe we continue to use the existing network for this boom boom liquid. Maybe we start to push that back. Maybe we sit here and we say, and now all of a sudden, wait a minute, this is actually carbon neutral. The energy required to produce it is significantly less than it is to produce, say, to pull lithium out of the ground or to mine sea salt and turn it into a sodium that can be used in batteries, or all of this other sort of stuff. And it is effectively recycling, right? If CO2 is being turned into gas, which then gets turned into part of it, it gets turned into, you know what I mean? That's where it gets really exciting for me, because I know you have been singing synthetic fuel for forever, but nobody other than really Porsche was really playing that song. And it was definitely not reaching the powers that be from a governmental standpoint. Now that someone like Ford is in, again, their competition cannot be left behind, because they'll stop. Like Ford will just explode, not literally, sales-wise. And the other companies do not want to be left behind.
My thing about the synthetic fuels on this topic is I don't think auto manufacturers are the answer here. I think that they are going to start the conversation and pioneer it a little bit. But I think that an outside company really needs to come in and start actually manufacturing this stuff, because right now, like we don't have Ford making gasoline, right? It's whatever's in your area, BP, Shell, Chevron, whatever gas is in your area, right? I don't think that the car manufacturers are going to be the ones actually producing this stuff. I think they see an opportunity to maybe pioneer the science behind it and maybe partner with an outside company to actually create it. But I don't think we're going to get to a point where Porsche or Ford are making stations to sell synthetic fuel to
No,
go in
that
your car.
wasn't. I'm sorry if I was unclear on that. That wasn't
No, no,
really the
no,
point I was making. It was if these guys are
no.
putting it into it, that then the third party, whether it be big oil, whether it be someone else who sees an
Right.
opportunity
Yeah.
to
No, I
jump
don't
in
think
and
I
run
didn't
with
think
it.
it was I didn't think that was your point at all, but I'm just saying as a continuation of the conversation, like I don't foresee them being the real, bastions of creation outside of the initial sort of scientific development of it, right? So I see like Ford and Porsche sort of doing it and then a BP sort of coming in and saying, okay, let me see your science, let's take it and then let's manufacture it and make it into there. I'm a very huge proponent of it. I've said it many times on stream that I think synthetic fuel is going to be the continuation of the ICE, and I think it's going to really sort of save the ICE. I see us having maybe a 25 to 40% EV saturation globally, maximum. Probably maybe 35 is my guess. I really think hydrogen is going to come into play in the next 50 to 100 years. That's my guess is going to be like the real next sort of horizon for propulsion in that respect. But I think synthetic fuels can take the ICE a lot farther than it could have gone. I'm very much only interested in synthetic fuels if we can make it so that we don't have a lot of emissions. And the reason for that is because of something we talked about in a previous one with the ozone layer. Because what happened in the 80s was we realized that all the aerosols in the air were basically depleting the ozone layer. And scientists and the governments went, "Oh shit, this is a big problem because you can literally see the ozone layer basically there's a giant freaking hole in it." And we realized it was just ramping up from all of this rampant aerosol use and all of these chemicals that were going into the atmosphere. Like we created the Montreal Protocol in 1987, and ozone depletion kept going. But because of the protocols, things started to get phased out, and now it's back up. Where by 2065, we will that's the target date. We will actually have a fully healed ozone layer. So the whole reason all these governments want to go EV is because these emissions are creating a lot of greenhouse gases, and no matter what way you slice it, many billions of cars on the road globally, they do create emissions. As far as the emissions total percentage wise globally, it's pretty small. Can control like emissions, right? With coming out of cars. So if we can get synthetic fuels to a place where they create no emissions, I think that is going to be the biggest turning point for synthetic fuels and for ICEs, combating EVs in the future. I would love to see that happen. I don't know if it's scientifically possible. I would love to get it to a point where synthetic fuels almost make it like a hydrogen engine where, yes, you have oil and that's a consumable product, but can we get it to a point where the synthetic fuel really doesn't emit any harmful CO2 so that we're continuing with this whole global warming effect, which is happening? And if the science was there for the ozone layer, the science is there for the whole global warming aspect of it right now. That's part of the reason why everyone wants to go EV, to get rid of emissions. I don't think ICE is going to die totally ever, but I'm really hoping that this whole synthetic fuel push sort of gets it to that less of an emissions standard than we have now with like a traditional gasoline, which isn't ideal, but I'm not going to stop using it because I really like the boom boom explosion noises and lots of exhaust noises too. So I love the whole thought of being able to produce our own fuel without having to mine for dinosaurs, if you will.
So obviously the end game here is renewability, and emissions, right? If
Right.
it's sustainable and renewable, something we can produce in house, and it's not helping the ozone deteriorate, if we can
Right.
do those two things, it is massive. It is huge. We are effectively self-sustaining at that point. And I think things
Yes.
like Doug was saying is the fact that people having the ability to generate their own power, meaning for the electric vehicles, right, is just another thing on top of that. I honestly think for electric cars to be successful, you're going to see that. Now, obviously, in more urban areas, that's not really possible because the square footage per human is so low
Right.
that solar would be great, but it's maybe going to give you 1% of a charge if everybody else is doing it at the same time. I honestly think once the big manufacturers start playing around with this, and it's like, being in school and they offer you an assignment, but you're like, yeah, but what about we do this instead, right? Or we start doing
Yeah.
this in conjunction with this, and you provide a coherent, well thought out, logical response, it helps. And then the byproduct is, like you said, our cars that run on explosive liquids live on, and the V8 doesn't
Right.
die. My car doesn't become prohibitively expensive to fuel because the fuel becomes so expensive and niche, right? God forbid, like regular fossil fuel, gasoline, became as scarce as E85. Well, the closest E85 to me is an hour away in Pennsylvania. That's why I'm not doing flex fuel or anything like that with the Mustang, is because
So we don't have any E85 in New Jersey? Is that a thing?
we do. It's just the closest is over in PA. It's
Jesus.
it's further down south. So like E85 options become
ridiculous.
just go to Ignite and buy 55-gallon drums of E90 at that point. I see this as relatively huge news from the simple fact that a major manufacturer is diving into this with an eye on enthusiasm, i.e. their Mustang drivers, their Raptor drivers, etc. And I think them getting involved would mean that other companies will have to follow suit or get left behind.
Yep.
And once that starts to happen, now someone's like, well, hey, Chevy, you don't produce the stuff. We'll do it. And we'll put it in stations. Right. Just give us the R&D, man. EVs are coming. They're going to eventually get a pretty significant part of the market. It's just the way it's going to be. But now there's like hope at the end of the tunnel that it doesn't have to be all EV. Middle American can get it. High densely populated areas can get it. The grid won't be as stressed as we thought it was going to be. There's just so many benefits from this that cannot be understated that make it awesome. Like, I'm crazy excited for it. If they had a GoFundMe, I'd give some money.
Yeah, totally. I 100% agree with that.